While there has never been a better time to be alive, with access to wonderful resources and opportunities, amazing innovations, advances in technology and better healthcare that can encourage the potential for our evolution and mutual prosperity, there is still a shadow of mistrust that's following us everywhere. We have more choices than ever before, and yet for some reason we're more wary, cynical and cautious. We're flooded with oceans of information that are polluted with fake news, and so we don't even trust ourselves to make informed decisions, let alone believe what brands and corporations are telling us. We're caught in a bind because while we need to keep moving forward, we do not know what to believe anymore, which means we're questioning and second-guessing everything and everyone, and it's exhausting. As they say, we live in interesting times. So to help us navigate these interesting times, I've designed the sales presentation in two parts. Firstly, I aim to highlight those human factors, cultural tendencies and ideologies that brought us to this current state of mistrust. A little caveat, I may unintentionally step on a few landmines or sacred beliefs as we explore this rather challenging terrain, so I do need you to be a bit adventurous and to go out on a limb as you hear me navigate my way through this. But secondly, I then want to look at the emerging trends that offer a more positive, confident and trustworthy pathway forward, showing us how we can continue to do better business, sell better and create relationships of mutual prosperity. So what got us to this place of mistrust in the first place? Despite all the many positives about our digital world and beyond, there are a number of factors, fads and ideologies that have been playing out in the business and governments over the last 30 to 40 years that have contributed to creating the current state of mistrust, including the following. We've seen race to the bottom practices that are destroying businesses, profit maximisation at the cost of everything else, cost cutting, offshoring, the cult of the celebrity CEO, bro cultures and so on. This, of course, does not imply that all leaders, teams, businesses, people and organisations and communities have gone down these pathways. However, there are big corporations, tech giants, other businesses and some governments who've prioritised growth maximisation and the concentration of power and wealth without, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here, stopping to think about the consequences, costs and impacts on people, business and the broader societies. Here are some of the consequences, including the costs and impacts of their decisions. Poor governance, bribery, corruption, shareholder return at the expense of customer fairness and care. We need look no further than the Banking Royal Commission. Hyper-individualism, a sense of entitlement, selfishness and self-obsession, corporate tax avoidance, anti-competitive strategies and predatory exploitation, the rise of populism, and the exponential rise in CEO and executive salaries and slow or no wages growth for the majority. All of this has contributed to one of the biggest rises in income inequality we have ever seen. It is worth stopping for a moment and looking at this specific topic in a bit more depth. Just to help us put income inequality into perspective, the average annual income for the lowest wage earners in the US in 1980 was $16,000. What do you think it is today? It's exactly the same. There has been zero growth in wages at this level, whilst those at the top have had a 200% increase in incomes. And you wonder why some people are upset and looking to take action. Now, is this a new phenomenon? Something that is unique to our time? Well, actually, no, it's not. Income inequality has been rising and falling in waves over the centuries and millennia. As we are currently in a cycle where we're seeing the actual impact of income inequality rise dramatically. If you want to dive into this topic in more detail, it's actually worth reading the work of Walter Scheidel, Professor of Classics and History at Stanford University, Branko Milanovic, Presidential Professor of City University at New York Graduate Center and the author of Global Inequality, A New Approach for the Age of Globalization, and Lucas Chancel, co-director of the World Inequality Lab at the Paris School of Economics and lead coordinator of the World Inequality Report 2018, which talks about rise and fall of inequality over human history. But here is a brief snapshot of their findings for the purposes of our session today. In hunter-gatherer societies, there was no real inequality because we all had to actually get along and trust each other to survive. But once we discovered wheat and started settling in one place to grow crops, we then developed states which precipitated the development of political power, land ownership, and the rise of the wealthy, and so on. Here, the seeds of inequality were sown. You can go all the way back to ancient Roman and Byzantine times to track the rise and fall of inequality. The highest levels of inequality we experienced before today's current situation can actually be traced back to the height of the Industrial Revolution. On the eve of World War I, in England, the richest 1% owned 70% of the private land, and 10% of the population had 92% of the private wealth, with nothing much left for the other 90% of the population. It was similar in France and across Europe, and of course there were no welfare states at the time. Inequality is seen as a major contributor actually to the outbreak of World War I, where the forces of technological process from the Industrial Revolution created more people than jobs. But by contrast, we actually don't have to look back too far at all to see the reverse, the golden age for economic growth and the lowest levels of inequality in Western economies such as France, US, UK and Sweden. This golden age was between 1945 and 1980. This situation came about because post-war government policies played a vital role in terms of rent control, higher taxes, restructuring of companies and groups, decreases in the concentration of capital, development of welfare states, education, health and infrastructure, which all helped with the distribution of fruits across all economic groups and where everyone was able to contribute to a future of prosperity. And it was in the 1970s that we saw the lowest levels of inequality, at least in the Western world. Interestingly, during the 1950s to the 1970s, the US was actually considered to be a socially democratic government from a political orientation and had high progressive tax rates with a top marginal tax rate at 90%. And then everything started to change in the 1980s with Reagan and Thatcher. It's been a slow burn since then, but it all seems to have caught up with us now, and it looks as if we're moving in the wrong direction again, which is creating more and more distrust as we see more and more inequality. It seems as a result of changes to wealth distribution, decreased taxes, profit maximisation and cost cutting at the expense of anything else, the gap of inequality is increasing, and with it creating a culture of mean-spiritedness and unethical conduct that seems to have grabbed hold of too many government and business leaders, and dare I say some of the wealthier beneficiaries, and the majority of people don't like it. In a recent article in The Economist, they reported that entitlement and status seeking are two big reasons why people, especially wealthy people, are increasingly behaving unethically. I'm sure you've read about the buying of education placements for children at elite universities. The article goes on to say that these people justify their unethical behaviour because they think they can get away with it, and in many cases they do. However, our increasing transparent world is catching people in the act. Human beings are by nature wired for fairness. So when the social contract is threatened or broken, and enough people can evidence the negative impact on themselves and others, they do react by taking action to redress this. Think of the various protests we're now seeing around the world on climate change, Brexit, women's rights, yellow shirts, and so on. The research shows that it's governments who decide how much or how little inequality there will be by the policies they design, enact, and enforce. So what we're seeing and hearing today is that the majority of people actually want businesses, governments, and in turn society to become more sustainable and fairer. They want a new golden era of prosperity. The researchers also noted that over human history, when equality gets to be too great, revolutions happen to reset the imbalance. But we do not need the past to define our future. Our future is yet to be determined. So if we can choose to make the necessary changes to reset, develop a better, fairer and more trusting business and society environment without resorting to war. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, there Sue goes again, all idealistic and optimistic. But I'm also a pragmatist. And I also understand that if we make it fairer for all, then businesses and societies flourish. To me, it makes sense that if we actually help each other, we can actually have a much better society and outcome for all. So, it all comes down to trust. Who do we trust? How do we help each other? What can we do to move forward? So let's take a look at the concept for trust. Trust is a vital element in our lives. As such, it has been studied and debated for centuries. Trust is the belief that someone or something is honest and will not harm you, or that someone or something is safe and reliable. Trust is necessary to the ongoing well-being of societies, including business. For the purposes of today, I have contained trust to the business environment, and we've chosen to use the definition of trust that has been promoted by the Harvard School of Business, which is that for trust to exist in any given situation, the following three elements must be present: authenticity, empathy, and logic. If any of these elements are not there or at risk, trust is threatened. The current volatile global political and corporate climate and the lack of effective leadership in national politics and the dearth of viable policies in Australia, combined with the findings of the Banking Royal Commission, have undermined trust on nearly every level. Trust in business, particularly big corporates, has never been worse. And out of all of the professions, none has suffered more in reputation and loss of trust than sales. Sales is, and has been for a long time, a mistrusted profession. This has come about because people and the media tend to only talk about unethical sales practices. When we read about a doctor that has done wrong by a patient or a coach that has allowed their team to be given drugs, we don't automatically condemn all doctors in medicine or all coaches in sports. So why do all salespeople and sales operations suffer the consequences of the unethical behaviour of a rotten few? The kind of unethical practices exposed by the Banking Royal Commission are seen by most as selling, which they are not. These unethical practices are nothing more than scams and schemes created and used to take unfair advantage of people. They do not support a fair exchange of value, nor do these schemes work towards long-term well-being or sustainability. Instead, these schemes are designed to line the pockets of a few at the expense of the many. They should never be called selling. Despite selling's bad PR, we know that selling is a vital business capability we all need to master if we are to move forward productively. Effective selling is about finding viable opportunities and cultivating healthy relationships based on evidence, substance, leading to trust and confidence. Done correctly, selling is the vehicle that allows opportunity to flourish and people to prosper. In line with this, and to help people understand that there's a better way of doing business, in December 2017, we launched the Selling Better movement. The Selling Better movement is built on mutual respect, evidence, transparency and trust, enabling the development of positive opportunities and healthy, viable relationships and partnerships. Now the question is, can trust in sales and business be rebuilt, and if so, how? The 2019 Sales Trends Trust Me, I'm in Sales shows that the answer seems to lie in developing human-centred organisations and human-centred sales teams. Trust is the heartbeat of all relationships. It is the heartbeat of friendships. It is the heartbeat of sales. It is the heartbeat of society. Without the life force of trust pumping vitality through our collective systems every day, we start to wither and recoil. We become weak and anemic. We close ourselves off and lose sight of what is real and important to our survival. Those organisations that value trust and trusted relationships do things to ensure that their customers, patrons, members, constituents, suppliers, employees and broader communities are central to their licence to keep on operating and cultivating ongoing mutual prosperity. They understand that trust is a fragile system that can be broken at any time. It needs constant attention and vigilance. It must be leader-led and reinforced and supported on a daily basis by our actions and our words. So let's take a look at Sales Trend 2, which focuses on trust, financial institutions and markets. David Robertson, Head of Economic and Market Research for Bendigo and Adelaide Bank, pointed out that 2018 was not a great year for stock prices, and the Banking Royal Commission will, according to an estimate from Shaw and Partners, cost the Big Four banks and AMP alone around $7.4 billion because of breaching trust. The cost of loss of community trust, of course, is much harder to estimate. David stated that trust and lending are inextricably linked, and banks need to be the foundation of trust for the financial system if we are to have viable economies and societies. Banking and business in general should and always be doing the right thing. It's about creating shared value, economic value along societal value, not just for profits. The 2019 sales trends highlight that more than ever before, that 21st century business is about creating societal outcomes feeding into prosperity, not of it. This is how we create trust. Trust is becoming the new currency. So where to from here? Well, there are quite a few options that are becoming more mainstream, including creating genuine customer-centric organisations, the consumer, shareholder and constituent activists, the social licence to operate, legislation about company directors being held accountable for environmental impact, transparent and ethical supply chains. So let's take a closer look at these in relation to how they affect sales and business on a daily basis. In the last 10 years or so, the concept of customer centricity began to emerge. While it is now a common phrase splashed liberally across many company websites and brochures, the true nature, spirit and practice of customer centricity is still viewed by many as an intellectual concept or platitude. However, there are many more organisations generally embracing these principles, values, behaviours and codes of conduct as the way they do business each day. Those businesses truly embracing a genuine customer-centric ethos across their entire value chain are rebuilding trust much more easily with their clients, suppliers and employees than those who just pay lip service to this concept. We are seeing this as we speak in the various projects we're working on with our clients. Sales Trend 9, for example, highlights the power of team selling, where the era of the solo individualistic salesperson is actually coming to an end. Instead, sales teams are now being made up of people from across the business disciplines with a range of skill sets working together across territory and account planning, CRM and sales pipeline development, social media interaction, content curation, data and business analytics, targeted prospecting and new business development, solution selling, tender and bid management, pricing and legal, post-sales engagement, right across the value chain. Today, we cannot rely on one person who knows it all, because quite frankly, it's too hard to find a person who can do it all and actually has the time to do it all. Team selling is most common in IT and SaaS teams. However, more businesses are now realising that by engaging people across their entire value chain, and I mean properly including other departments in how we sell around here, they find engaging them in client relationship management, development and care is now offering truly genuine customer-centric experience where everyone benefits. For instance, the most traditional businesses take a bow tie approach to account management, which often chokes the customer's experience and leaves the rest of the business isolated from the customer and vulnerable to a few key players. Customer-centric selling, however, adopts the butterfly approach to managing and developing client relationships. But in order to deliver the butterfly effect, everyone in your business has to know what they stand for, what they do, how they work together to deliver your promise, whatever that may be. This builds mutual trust across everyone. Which leads me to Sales Trend 7, which is all about brand and purpose coming together. For trust to thrive, we must deliver on the trust parameters of authenticity, empathy and logic. We need to move beyond brand markers of name logos and brand messages and instead move forward by leading with purpose and experience. And while the importance of purpose and values is not new to us, there is now hyper-awareness about them, which means we also need to be hyper-aware about the toxic trend of identity washing. Just like greenwashing tarnished genuine environmentally oriented businesses, identity washing will be our undoing if we do not generally undertake to make our purpose a way of life for our business and teams. So what is your core ideology and promise? Does it cascade down and across your business authentically? And does it deliver the promise and experience that you want? Delivering every time on the promises we make means we need to take care of our employees so they will take care of our customers and keep the loop of relationships moving forward with good outcomes. When our brand and purpose is a lived experience across our interconnected business, then our customer and partners can trust that we have their best intentions at heart, and with that they trust us and are confident in their decisions to keep working with us. Staying with customer centricity, Sales Trend 5 focuses on using sales enablement technology to build trust. But despite the excitement around AI, account-based marketing, email tracking and auto dialers that are enabling sales people to reach more prospects faster, this is not necessarily equating to more sales. The counter trend is much more important and is focusing us on understanding our prospects and actually going after quality. It's about going laser, not splat. Yes, it's easy to reach 5,000 or 50,000 people in one click of a button. However, how are you being perceived and received? We now know that prospects delete 90% of emails without opening them, and they're hiding behind voicemail. Despite all the technology available, human nature hasn't changed. We still want to be listened to and understood. This is how we begin to build trust. As Oprah pointed out in her final show some years ago, where she interviewed 30,000 people across 4,300 shows for 25 years, she talked about the one thing that they wanted to know the answers to was, do you see me, do you hear me, and does what I say matter to you? Validation, personalisation and connectivity are the heart of any relationship, so no spamming. Smart companies are realising that they need to clearly define their target markets, companies and prospects into micro segments, then tailor different messages to address them specifically. It's about who you want to engage with what, who's doing the engaging, and how you do it. Which leads us to Sales Trend 4, which is about how trust improves learning and development cultures. A culture of trust, or lack thereof, has a dramatic impact on salespeople and their performance. We know salespeople are expected to build trust and confidence with clients, but how trusted are they internally by their sales leaders and other departments? If sales leaders and other internal stakeholders hold negative views and stereotypes about their sales teams, then trust just simply cannot exist. Mutual trust must exist and manifest in how we treat and trust each other to do our jobs properly. Smart companies recognise that they must create internal climates of trust that positively impact their teams, customers and sales results. Climates and cultures of trust are embedded by an articulated framework that delivers transparency and offers daily practice and reflection, what we call a perpetual learning environment. Trusted and trusting leaders are living role models of what trusted relationships look like every day, internally and externally. Trusting sales leaders leverage their salespeople's potential through the provision of a clear strategy, a structural framework of accountability, regular coaching around an articulated sales process and plan, constructive feedback, ongoing training, support, collaboration, and of course, teamwork, which means they can confidently let their salespeople get on and do their jobs well. Smart organisations are saying no to the annual generic sales training event, which costs a lot and delivers very little, and a big yes to creating cost-effective, relevant, continuous learning environments that are based on mastery, strategy and purpose. And they're not stopping there. They're engaging all other stakeholders across the value chain to understand, support and trust the sales process and their teams. And it's delivering the big sales outcomes business leaders want. $1 billion plus company we're working with at the moment has been able to actually win $100 million of brand new business in less than 2 months over the Christmas period with a well-trained sales force and targeted sales campaign supported by committed internal teams. And that's only just the start. This doesn't have to take long at all. And if that doesn't convince you to take action, then perhaps the activist consumer, shareholder and constituents might nudge you along. More and more people are becoming better educated and more informed about the impact of the supply chain, business and consumerism on society and the environment. They are demanding that organisations and governments act, behave in more ethical, fair and sustainable ways now and for the future. The increasing urgency for action on climate change is ramping up. Just look at the Australian school students, some as young as 8, protesting in November and March about inaction on climate change by the federal government, and the message it sends out to the rest of us. Just because they're too young to vote now doesn't mean they don't have influence. They have plenty. How many parents in the room today here have been called out by their children about how they recycle and what they buy? Younger people are more informed older people are voting with their wallets and ballot cards and choosing to buy or vote from those organisations who transparently demonstrate their bona fides in environmental and social intentions. And their credentials are all about doing good business, from across the supply chain and back again. For instance, fast fashion looks as though it's actually on its way out because people are realising its damaging impact on the environment, and instead of looking to hold on to or repurpose their clothes. Bayer's share price plummeted last week by $11.2 billion due to cancer concerns around Roundup. Workers on strike at Chemist Warehouse because of unfair underpaid worker contracts, which is leaving their shelves empty. Apple, in a rare move in January this year, issued a warning on its quarterly revenue guidance amid slowing iPhone sales in China and a litany of other issues. The announcement slammed shares, setting them down by more than 8% the week of the announcement. And over the weekend, it was reported that Myer is removing Apple products from their stores because they do not deliver business value. And don't get me started on the other problems for Myer and David Jones, that's just too long to go into. However, on the bright side, IKEA is now taking back used furniture for recycling and repurposing. Repair cafes are popping up all over cities where people can take their broken appliances to be repaired by volunteers who lend their expertise to keep things working so they don't get thrown into landfill. There's a little bit more on this later when Suzanne will highlight even more positives about the future of business and the new opportunities in her presentation. So let's now focus on sales trend 3, which is all about procurement. Procurement is all about trust. The integrity of the supply chain process is key to trust. With supply chains operating in a global marketplace, procurement must think about supply chain efficiency, cost effectiveness, and supply stability. That sounds reasonable. However, with the rise of social procurement, it is also being asked to look at whether the spend has a positive social impact. To measure this, procurement needs data. It needs to know if a business is trustworthy. So data is now the new oil. And treated properly, data can actually form the cornerstones of the houses of trust. Technologies such as blockchain and smart contracts are making it easier to track purchasing decisions and where they come from down to the very smallest details, often forever. The supply chain can now be tracked. This puts a whole new lens of transparency on how things are made and sold. Customers, whether they be B2B or B2C, want more transparency when it comes to where our goods and services come from and who the supplier is aligned to. However, with this new transparency, there is even a greater push now to ensure well-coordinated strategies around data, privacy and the law. For instance, the Europe GDPR has legislated the right to be forgotten when it comes to our personal identities on the internet. On one hand, we want data transparency. On the other hand, we want our data to be private. So what do we do? Simply put, businesses and governments on all levels are being put on notice. Can we trust you to do the right thing for everything? It's not easy. Further to this, we come to sales trend 10, which focuses on the rather onerous areas of tenders and bid management, which is an increasingly tricky area to navigate. Sadly, some organisations are still using the rigorous bid process to strip mine suppliers of their IP so they can save money and do it themselves, which is nothing short of theft and continues to erode trust and is costly on every level. But despite this, there are changes afoot. Procurement is realising there is much more to a tender than a line item and a price. There are people with ideas and insights who can deliver a lot more value when they bring it to the table. So setting up viable relationships is still at the heart of effective tender and bid management. Most of us know that winning a tender starts way before the tender is released. For instance, research has identified that if we're already the incumbent supplier, 2/3 of liked organisations, those already delivering the work, will actually re-win the tenders. So despite the overt quantitative scoring schemes for tenders, we are seeing that there is always a degree of personal judgment at play. How you are perceived by the client is still critical. Human nature being what it is, we find organisations buy from those who they trust and believe capable of delivering. Believability is key because it engenders trust and in turn it lowers perceived risk. And re-winning a tender starts day one of delivering the new contract, which is why we need to equip the service line to deliver on the promises we made and reinforce trust every step of the way across the client's journey with our value chain. So what about our social licence to operate, legislation, whistleblowers, and the role of boards and management when it comes to reclaiming trust and selling better? There's an old German saying, which is quite apt here: you sweep the staircase from the top. Open, honest, purposeful and committed leadership is vital. Saying one thing and doing another, well, that's just stupid and it violates trust. This may all seem like common sense to you, but common sense doesn't seem to be so common anymore. Which brings me to our social licence to operate. While SLOs have been around for more than 20 years, starting in the mining and mineral sector, where organisations were negotiating with communities and seeking approval to set up operations or broad social acceptance, SLOs are now gaining more traction as consumer bodies, businesses, organisations and the industry bodies try to find ways to navigate the social, commercial and legal contracts between consumers and organisations. So much so that the Australian Stock Exchange Corporate Governance Council proposed to include a social licence to operate in its corporate governance principles and recommendations, which include a significant amendment to Principle 3, changing it from a listed entity should act ethically and responsibly to a listed entity should instil and continually reinforce a culture across the organisation of acting lawfully, ethically and in a socially responsible manner. The proposed new commentary for Principle 3 says that a listed entity's social licence to operate is one of the most valuable assets that can be lost or seriously damaged if the entity or the officers or employees are perceived to have acted unlawfully, unethically or in a socially irresponsible manner. And that with appropriate training and reinforcement from senior management, a listed entity's code of conduct can help to instil a culture of acting lawfully, ethically and in a socially responsible manner. A new recommended 3.3 proposes a whistleblower policy that encourages employees to come forward with concerns that the entity is not acting lawfully, ethically or in a socially responsible manner and provides suitable protections if they do. Interestingly, shareholder groups, the big super funds and the Australian Council of Superannuation Investors made submissions supporting the proposal, while former heads of the Australian Stock Exchange, an investment banker, the new chair of AMP and the Australian Institute of Company Directors publicly opposed or expressed concerns about this. Fascinating. Along with this, ASIC Commissioner John Price says directors would do well to carefully consider a 2016 legal opinion by Noel Huntley SC and Sebastian Hartford Davis that they could face lawsuits for failing to consider risks related to climate change. Mr Price said the advice, which was commissioned by the Centre for Policy Development and the Future Business Council, appears legally sound and is reflective of our understanding of the position under the prevailing case law in Australia insofar as directors' duties are concerned. Company directors and senior management are either willingly or being forced to consider the consequences and impact of their decisions and actions now and into the future. How they act will have positive or negative implications for everyone concerned. Operating ethical businesses and being good for the planet and its inhabitants benefits the bottom line and just makes good business sense. There is plenty of research to support this. Business models like share value and benefit corporations accompanying businesses that are leading the way in its turn and building trust on all levels. Earlier this year, Larry Fink, the CEO of assets manager BlackRock, sent a letter to the biggest companies in the world warning them on the need to demonstrate long-term value creation and the impact their operations have on the world and how they make a positive contribution to society. Almost at the same time that letter went out, Danone, a French multinational food corporation, announced it had partnered with 12 leading global banks to lower their loan rates if Danone increases its verified positive impact in the world, giving Danone a big advantage in accessing cheaper capital for improving their already positive environmental goals. Which leads me to the final trends about us as salespeople, about creating optimism, building our own personal authentic brand of trust, and the role of marketing in keeping our stories circulating and spreading messages of hope, optimism, and trust. So let's put the negative perception of selling and mistrust fair and square on the table first. Roy Morgan research highlighted the top 3 drivers of mistrust are greed, self-interest, profits before clients, dishonest, deceitful, false, misleading advertising and making false claims, and being unethical and lack of integrity. Over the last 30 to 40 years, too many sales cultures have been built on these shaky foundations, leaving people wary and concerned, if not somewhat alarmed. When trust is low or non-existent, no one is more affected than salespeople. They're the public face. They have to deal with any misalignment between sales and marketing, implementation process and customer service, who to sell to, good or bad clients, and how they're rewarded for their results. Building trust is a long-term process and is affected by every step of the client value chain. However, trust can be broken in an instant. The good news is that trusted salespeople are rising to the challenge to deliver more human-centred ethical sales practices. They are proving to be truly solutions-oriented, flexible, transparent, consistent, predictable, and demonstrate their genuine care about their clients and their own company, benefiting mutually from any deal or arrangement. Trusted salespeople know that first impressions count on every level and in the blink of an eye. They know that they are ambassadors for their company and industry. They are professional. However, they're also wary of looking a little bit too slick, which is now often actually seen as untrustworthy. Sadly, people are now more than wary about the corporate end of town. And while there is a move to more casual dress sense in business, our clothes and manners still need to be of quality. Beyond our physical appearance, our attitudes also make a huge difference too. Victor Purton tells us in Sales Trend 8 that while trust is at an all-time low, many people still seem to be optimistic for themselves in spite of the continuous bad news cycle, which is great. And they are right to remain optimistic given the amount of amazing opportunities out there. It's all in how we view our situation and how we communicate our intentions, especially as leaders. PwC has coined the term the anxious optimist in the corner office. These are leaders who are optimistic about the business environment despite the volatile political climate worldwide, and so, whilst being more considered and somewhat cautious in their decisions, they're still determined to lead their companies and focus on opportunities that are available. They encourage can-do cultures, not doom and gloom. Optimist business leaders look for tangible, believable pathways forward and gauge the whole business on this can-do journey. And here's where marketing plays an important role by doing the same with the outside world. For too long, marketing has been absorbed with creating and delivering the hypothetical customer experience. But we cannot deliver a genuine customer experience if we don't know how to operate a human-centred business. Valuing the human experience for everyone in and outside of the organisation is our daily job. It's about finding meaningful engagement. Businesses need to be all about cultivating meaningful engagement, and here is where marketing is charged with telling the stories. This sales trend sees companies getting marketing to play a key role in creating truly human-centred businesses with purposes as their core and brands as their vehicle to communicate and connect with customers, establishing tangible bridges of meaningful human relationships. What does all this mean for us here today and for any other leader? We need to hold on to and in some cases regain and build trust with our teams, our clients, our suppliers and our communities, recognising that trust is the heartbeat of business. So here are 4 ways, or 4 takeouts, if you haven't got enough already that is, to help you look at how to rebuild and gain trust in your business. Sales and business leaders have to be clear, consistent and committed in their actions and intentions. Organisations, to be trusted, need to focus on cultivating real human experiences and connections and trust their teams to do their jobs well. Business and sales leaders need the knowledge, mindset and resources to develop and deliver on the promises their businesses make, and underpin all of this with systems of mastery and execution. Thank you for staying with me on the course of this rather epic tale. I'd like to keep your questions till the end when we bring all of our guests up our guest speakers up for questions. But now my job is to introduce you to our next speaker. So thank you for paying attention. Okay.